Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources about how to cut sugar, then I have plenty for you. Come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration, pictures of meals, short reels, useful info to get you started on your life after sugar, as well as thought-provoking quotes and even sometimes pictures of our cat, so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_lifeaftersugar. And if cravings are getting in the way and causing you to fall off the wagon, then I have 5 tips for you, especially if you're an intermittent faster, to help you get rid of cravings. Go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. You can also find my simple guide for getting more energy with less sugar by going to aftersugarclub.com, scrolling down to the bottom and clicking on Simple Guide. And while you're there at aftersugarclub.com, you can also have a look at the videos I've made for you to show you what to eat that doesn't contain added sugars, where to find real whole foods at the grocery store, and also how to look after your gut health, because cutting sugar is one of the best things you can do for your gut health. Go to aftersugarclub.com to get your free resources today. All right, so here's my chat with Dr. Cecilia Minano. So today I'm talking with Dr. Cecilia, and can you tell me, Cecilia, a little bit about yourself and what you do and your history with food and sugar?
Yes, so I am Dr. Cecilia Minano. I am here in New Jersey. I am a gastroenterologist. I've been in practice for over 15 years. I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to talk to your audience. So I just want to touch a little bit about my journey, how I became a doctor, and then sort of my chapter I've added on coaching. So I come from a difficult childhood, and what I'll say is like we're immigrants from Peru, single family home, and I didn't realize the imprint it had on me until much later, which we'll talk about. But I learned from a young age to compartmentalize my own symptoms. And it allowed me to then sort of be super focused on my education. I always had a love for books. And so, on one hand, it allowed me to achieve my dream. I became a doctor. I self-sacrificed. I gave of myself to others. I had a lot of perfectionist thinking, etc. But what happened is there had this underlying anxiety throughout most of my life. And I didn't really understand it until COVID hit, when I started to sort of fall apart. And that's where I first discovered I was even in what we call burnout, this sort of stressful situation it can be from a multitude of things. For me, it was work. And what happened was I was showing up very frustrated with myself, toward my family, toward patients. I was not sleeping. It was at a critical time where people were dying, including I had a few colleagues die, patients. So talk about like super stress on my system.
Oh, yeah.
And I was lucky that I had remembered a colleague told me about coaching and how much it had transformed her life. So I then became a client of coaching. And what it does is through questioning, you discover what your sort of underlying messages, self-talk is. And I didn't even realize how negative I spoke to myself and how it sort of skewed the lens of which I saw the world. I was always like the world was against me and things were happening to me. And so it was the first time in my life where I really paused and I was able to recognize, wait a minute, this is reactivity from a history of trauma, chronic stress. And I have actually choice in this matter, and I can learn boundaries and self-care. So that's sort of how my journey to this new chapter is. And so what I want to offer to your audience is that, yes, some of the things we face and conditions we're given, some of it is genetic, but so much is also the factors that surround us, what we put into our food. What we put into our mouths, the environment, the chronic stress, the traumas, sleep. All of these have many roles in our overall health, and we can change them. We can't change our genetics or what we grew up with, but our future is so optimistic and there's hope.
Oh, what a wonderful message. Thank you. We need
And
that every single day.
And then let me just tell you my brief sugar journey, because I know your listeners are very attuned with that.
Yes.
So as I look back on my childhood, I was very much a sugar addict. I calmed my own insecurities, my fears, my emotions with sugar. And so part of it was escape through education, but there was a large part that got comforted by this food. And so now that I have this amazing medical knowledge and like the coaching, I realized it's only natural that I was doing that. So what your audience I'm sure knows is that the food industry has manufactured our foods to make them very different from what a natural sugar is in like a plant-based farm or something. So it's made to taste better, the texture is good, and it's supposed to have a longer shelf life. Well, this super concentrated sugar is then going into our brains and creating that pleasure, which is like a dopamine hit. And so for an initial period, we are feeling better. We're almost like high, but then what happens is over time, chronic use of it, then it affects like your memory, learning abilities, cognition, mood. It has all sort of negative effects on our gut. And so you think that by eating sugar, it's like calming and soothing, and you are given into this reward system, but it's like a manufactured thing by our food industry. And so there's one hand of like not being able to manage emotions, but then it's also like manufactured products from, a company that's making money off of us. In addition to that, I do think it sort of stimulates a part of our brain called the amygdala, which I'm going to discuss in a little bit, but it's basically our danger detector in the world. And when we fill our bodies with sugar, it's putting that into more of a fear state or danger state, which is then amplifying a lot of like mood disorders and inability to sleep and bad microbiome and something called dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of our gut. So we think it's like the one sugar, but it has so many ripple effects that's affecting us. And recently I went on a sugar detox. And what I'll share with your audience is that I recently, we have a challenge where we're like eliminating it, and that you have these ability to like for a special occasion indulge. Mm-hmm. So even after like 3 bites of a sweet, I remember like getting this sort of high, almost like I was buzzed. And then within an hour, I like came crashing down, and like I almost like slurred speech. It was like my brain was foggy and I had to go to bed. It was like 9 p.m. and I was like lights out.
After and just 3 bites?
This is after not being on sugar for like 60 days.
Yeah.
So it's like my body detoxed, and then it was like in a more normal state, and then it got that temporary overstimulation and then crash and burn. So I have both my medical knowledge now, and I have my own lived experience with sugar. So I basically eliminate it, and occasionally, like socially, I will engage in it. But even that is like a future outcome I want to work toward, just completely eliminating it.
Does that experience make you think, oh, I don't want to go through that again? I might as well just not eat it.
Totally. And everybody's threshold for that is different. I think if you're still very reactive and responding to the world, it's only natural that you want to sort of self-soothe. But
Yeah.
when you've been on a journey and you realize, wait, I can soothe myself, then I think there's more ample room. So I don't want to say one size fits all. I think it's definitely should be in the future for everyone, but everyone's nervous system is at different states. So I think consider it in addition to your other healing modalities.
Yes, yeah, very wise advice. And that brings us to, you know, the whole concept of stress. Can you tell us, in your experience as a doctor especially, what is stress, what is chronic stress, and trauma as well?
Yeah, so stress, I just want to clarify what it is. So it's a physical or emotional tension in our body, and it was created for our survival. So if we think back to our caveman days, stress was necessary for us to go fight the lion or fight the beast to get our, nutrition, to protect our families. And then the idea was that it was short-lived, and then we came back to more of a nurturing state, connecting with loved ones, etc. And in real time, stress is necessary. Like when we think about learning to walk or giving a speech in front of others, we need that sort of surge of stress hormones to get us to evolve into our next best self. It's part of our necessary growing and development. But what happens for a lot of us is that we don't then discharge that energy. It gets sort of embedded in our tissues and our mind. And that's where it's creating like long-term health consequences. So just really briefly, the difference between what I call that more acute stress versus chronic stress is that it's prolonged. You can begin to feel trapped, like you have no escape, and your body is chronically surging like cortisol, the stress hormone, and neurotransmitters like epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is then becoming embedded in our tissues. Um, so trauma is a subjective experience of an event that not only changes our physiology, but our whole viewpoint. And it has been shown to change the brain dynamics. So I classify trauma as the 5 E's. So it's an exposure to an event in your environment, its effects on the individual, and that's physiological, psychological, and emotional, and then your experience of that event. So what might be traumatic for you, for someone else in that same situation, it may not be traumatic. And what I want to offer your audience is we think that trauma, we probably can't, some of us can't even identify with that word, but that energy is living in our tissues and showing up in ways of like different ways of thinking, right? We can feel hopeless, shame, overwhelm, shut down, or it can manifest in physical manifestations, which is like the chronic headaches, the chest pain, the belly pain, the altered bowel. So it's not easy sort of to pinpoint, especially like for people who've been living in a chronically stressed state. Like it really took for me to hit COVID to realize its impact on my own organism. I thought I was sort of just living life and it was happening. And it's not till now that it was like a forced pause because my mental, stability required it, that then I recognized, oh, wait, I was sort of living in that like chronic stress, sympathetic fight or flight, and even sometimes that overwhelm freeze response.
Yeah, I recognize myself in what you describe. And do you think, in your experience, are most people suffering from some high level, low level, or chronic stress?
Absolutely. In the current environment within, with like social media, being able to put your news on right away, us not learning these life skills of grounding and meditation. I know people talk about it, but I don't think people realize the imprint, all these factors of like political unrest, global disasters, global warming, all these, even if you're not reading about it, you're getting subconscious messages, and it's definitely like percolating under. And it, for some of us, it's like a event that makes us sort of stop acutely. And in others, it's like little messages like, I'm not sleeping well, I have the bloating, I have pain. And so I think my message to your audience is really being mindful and being present, because that's where you tap into the wisdom of your own body sensations and the knowledge. Sometimes the messages aren't that there's a structural problem or disease, but it's something that's out of balance. And it's like through our own pausing and questioning is how we determine that.
Love that. Yes. And as a gastroenterologist, you know, or do you, about gut health? Is that right?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that in our medical training, we don't learn a lot about nutrition, which is very sad, even as a subspecialist in this field. We're very good in like the, allopathic realm to treat diseases. So it's like sort of the end stage. So I've sort of embarked on this journey more from post COVID, like learning my own healing journey. But what I will say, my emphasis with the whole chronic stress and trauma is that it is impacting your gut health. And so that's what I want to sort of teach your audience. But the one pearl I'll say is the more like plant-based and natural foods we can eat, always the best. And no one size fits all. So your girlfriend could say like, cut out this food or do this kombucha tea. And you really have to have your own experience with it and
Yes.
decide what's best for you. So I'm not here to say do this one thing and it's going to cure all. This is definitely a journey for all of us.
I want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews. And when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar. I just find that I totally agree. Totally. I just find that as a common denominator for the vast majority of people, cutting sugar and processed foods seems to help with gut health.
100%.
Your experience.
That is absolutely my experience. So I do think the more we can cut that out, for sure. I think these are manufactured foods and they're creating havoc at multiple levels of our system.
Yeah.
So back to the stress, I want to just highlight that there's a theory called the polyvagal theory, which teaches us that our vagus nerve is in constant contact both internally with our sensations, emotions, but also with the outside world. And in an ideal world for optimal digestion, we want to be in that ventral parasympathetic state, which is where our vagus nerve is online. We're connecting with others. We're being very mindful with our eating. And at a gut level, that's where we're optimizing the breakdown of those foods to like their, minuscule molecule that then can be absorbed. It's promoting peristalsis, which is that sort of movement throughout our intestine, which helps to push things along, but also remove toxins. It's affecting our own microbiome. It's allowing for that sort of coordinated effort and diversity of like bacteria, fungi, viruses, et cetera, that keep, create that neurotransmitters. I don't know if people know, but a lot of our serotonin is made in our gut. So if we have an optimal microbiome, we're producing those positive neurotransmitters that sort of feed our mood and our overall sense of being. It's also directly impacting like our ability to have endocrine and immune function. So there's a lot of signaling pathways that happen in our gut level when we can sort of proactively engage that parasympathetic nervous system. And when we're in that fight or flight state where we're releasing all those stress hormones, or conversely, when we're in that freeze response, which is that dorsal vagal response where we're shut down and shameful and guilt, those are sending so much inhibitory messages to our digestive tract. So it's no wonder that you're not allowed to go to the bathroom. You're not able to process food, that you're feeling distended. I love to tell people, like, not just monitoring the foods you eat, but what's your state of your nervous system, right? Sometimes it's like these stressors in our life that we're not dealing with, but we're blaming it on this one food we ate, when it's so, there's so many factors that play a role. But I want to tell people to monitor intake, but also your self-care and also your emotions. They're all like critical for our overall well-being.
Yeah, they're all connected. And my experience, and I'm just one person, but my experience was when I was going to the bathroom, that's my euphemism, for just once a week, if that, and suffering terribly. And I went to the gastroenterologist and I got the, what's it called, where they put a camera in,
Colonoscopy.
colonoscopy, and everything came back normal. And it was so frustrating for me to be told everything's normal. And I was feeling and behaving anything but normal. You know, it's like you seem to be the type of doctor that gets that it's not just about the digestive tract, there's other things going on. But it hasn't been my personal experience, and it was very frustrating, I can say, as a patient. Can you tell us a bit about some of the common gut issues that your clients experience?
Yeah, I just want to highlight that your experience is very common, particularly with sort of the Western view of medicine. And I will say, I lived in that for so long because that's how we're trained, right? We're not taught about these other factors that play a role. So I do think there's a big gap in sort of, we're good at, like, you don't have all these things, but then patients are left like powerless of like, well, what is it and how can I help myself? So
Absolutely.
that's where I think the beauty of your podcast and, us all educating ourselves and through our own healing journey. But I do think that message has to be sort of conveyed more mass wide.
Yeah.
Um, so your experience, I just want to value it. It's not,
Thank you.
it's
Thank you.
noted and very important to talk about.
Thank you.
Um, so regarding like chronic gut issues, so I'll give you a few patient experiences just so you sort of see what I do with clients. So in my day job, I'm a gastroenterologist, and more evenings and weekends I do the coaching. And I try to integrate both my medical knowledge, but not being someone's individual doctor, of course. And then I help them reintegrate the mind and body. So what does that mean? So like I said, when I was like, go, 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 I sort of have shut off all my emotions and I was very intellectual, but it was manifesting for me in like not sleeping, not eating well, crying a lot. You name it, I probably had it. Um, and so through my own coaching experience, it's like relearning, how does stress manifest for you in your body? So for some of us, like I'll give you an example, frustration is a common denominator in medicine, right? Like people show up late, like the insurance is harassing us, the medication wasn't received. So I've learned to, like, frustration just comes with par for the course. So now I know when I'm frustrated, my face gets flushed, my ears get hot, and that's sort of my little alarm system that, like, okay, I need to take a pause here. So sometimes I'll breathe or I'll go outside. Things that I recognize my nervous system is trying to get activated. So it's like, how do I decompress? The same with my children are, in their preteen moods. It's like I used to let that stuff sort of affect me. And now I recognize that, what, my nervous system, I have to care for me first. So if I'm starting to get activated, let me ground myself. Let me find ways to bring that vagus nerve back in line. So with clients specifically, I'll give you two that I'm very proud of. One was a woman whose husband had passed during COVID, and then she had developed a gut infection. And so I met her, and any sensation she felt immediately either put her into that fight or flight stress response or that freeze response. And she would dwell in this for hours. And so my work with her was to begin to notice, okay, I'm in a stress state. Is there a fire happening? Is there a lion coming to get me? And so she began to peel away and say, no, 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 my nervous system is activated. So now with that information, then we began to downregulate her nervous system. So she began to breathe and feel the feet on her ground and give herself a hug. And it was messages of safety for her amygdala, that danger detector. And then from there, she began to open up awareness of these sensations and approach them instead of with a fear lens, more of a curiosity, like, oh, I'm feeling this pain, this bloating. What is showing up for me? What is true? So then she's like, oh my God, my daughter just said something negatively. And oh, it's interesting that then thereafter I started getting all these discomforts. So we began to see a pattern for her, and she recognized and got more empowered with these sensations, and it didn't like put her into a total like a state where she couldn't sort of function. And so the beauty with that story is it's not to say she still doesn't encounter, some sensations, but she has so many more tools in her box that now she's able to still function and recognize, okay, this is mild and I'm going to manage it. If it gets like to this state, then I'll call my doctor. So again, I'm not saying like you shouldn't seek out your medical care. Obviously, I'm a doctor, so I'm going to advise you to follow your best judgment. But we don't want people to be like ill-equipped to manage their own symptoms.
Right, absolutely.
And then the other patient was a male financial person in finance who was showing up very frustrated with his family at work, coming home and binging on like alcohol or ice cream. And with him, we recognized that he had never adopted self-care. He was like me, that had sort of gone, and was providing for everyone, but never himself. And it was interesting when we noted his nervous system. The minute he woke up, it was like the 10 things to do and check the email and which meeting do I have. And we began with a simple 5 to 10 minutes of like, all right, I'm not going to touch my phone. I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes. I'm going to feel gratitude for this day. As he brushed his teeth, we really got into those sensations of the bristles touching his mouth and really letting go of the story and just being mindful with yourself. In the shower, the same, like feeling your scalp, all messages of safety for our nervous system. And as he did that over time, then he did it before walking into the house. So now he was showing up a calmer father, husband. And from that state, he then began to make better food choices and wasn't binging. And so it was a beautiful illustration of somebody that didn't even realize their feelings or emotions because they had sort of cut off mind and body. And then they began to be more nurturing with themselves, and their life is so much different.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's amazing. Because when we think, or most people, myself included, before I knew more about gut health, and I'm certain I don't know as much as you do, but most people think gut health is to do with digestion, and the transit and everything else. And we never think, or I never thought, that it had anything to do with our emotions, our level of stress. It's almost like we put things into separate drawers and we don't realize that they're all connected.
100%. There's a strong mind-body connection, and even things that are very subconscious, you may not even realize it. But
Yeah.
all these signaling are definitely impacting like our microbiome. Even as simple as like sleep, when we don't get adequate sleep, it's altering the microbiome that should be sort of rest and repair into like whatever state. Either if you're eating when you shouldn't out of those hours, or if you're like chronically stressed, it's almost like changing your whole like system down there, which is impacting you in the long run.
Yeah,
So,
amazing.
so it's important to highlight all these things. They're all impacting different signaling. And remember, when we're chronically stressed, our sugar gets more elevated. So then we're leading into more of like a diabetes state. So it's bottom line is there's room for all of us to change, and it's making small little habit changes. And I'm totally for the healthy eating and cutting out all the processed food sugars, but also being in tune with what your body needs and your nervous system.
Yes, totally. Can I ask you one last question?
Yes.
When you prep people or ask people to prep for their colonoscopies, do you give them a list of things they're allowed to eat or drink?
Yes.
And does that list, I know here, and I'm not trying to catch you out, but I know here in Canada, I was given a list of which 90% was sugar in some form. Is that the case in the US as well?
Yes, now that I'm thinking about it, yes. We recommend like apple juice or Gatorade, yes, which does have sugar.
Yeah.
Because I think we're more focused on the electrolytes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is sugar an electrolyte?
No. We think about the sodium and potassium. That's why we
Yeah.
recommend the Gatorade. But yeah, you're right. That's a good point. I will have to revisit that. Because mainly for people that worry about their sugar dropping, that might be the exception. But I do think our body naturally produces enough to be fine with water.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because I was shocked, because I'd been sugar-free for quite a while when I had my colonoscopy done. And I shouldn't have done this, but I told my doctor off, my gastroenterologist, I said, why are you giving me a list of sugar? That.
Yeah, no, but I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. As we're talking about it, you're absolutely right. I feel like the majority of it, other than water, is all like sugar-based drinks.
Yeah, just thought
I have to
I'd
revisit
mention
that.
it.
I'm gonna revisit it. Absolutely.
Wonderful. All right. Look, it's been enlightening and a real pleasure to have you on the podcast to tell the listeners about your areas of expertise. And what really impresses me is that you have this holistic view of health, which is relatively rare, I found, in MDs. So I do appreciate you sharing that.
Yes, and I would love for your audience to learn more about me, to come to my website. It's CeciliaMinanoMD.com. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes, but
It will. I will definitely add that because, yes, you're a wonderful reference for my people listening. Thank
yeah, I
you.
love so. And then just to piggyback, I'm not here to be a doctor. My coaching is more to help you in your day to day between your visits, regulating your nervous system so that you can manage your day to day symptoms.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cecilia.
Thank you.
And that is why I created the After Sugar Club. If you're ready and committed to your own well-being and to improving your health by cutting sugar, and if you want to be with other like-minded people, then join us in the After Sugar Club. When you sign up, you'll get all the support, the accountability, and the guidance you need to break free from the diet culture as well as from the emotional dependency that you have on sugar. Go to aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button to see everything that's included in the After Sugar Club and in the Premium After Sugar Club, where you'll get much more personalized and customized guidance and feedback to help you on your journey to breaking free from sugar. Plus, you get a whole year for free in the After Sugar Club when you sign up for the premium option. Go to aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button to join us. Thank you for listening. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.